Welcome to the next episode of KapVista Klips. Today we have Graham and Peter from Qponics, and I'm excited to hear about their story. Hi guys, how are you?
Excellent, thanks, Daniel.
Awesome. So let's jump straight into it. Tell me about your background. Tell me about your experience and how you got to this point.
Okay, I'll kick off. Graham Barnett's my name. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Qponics. I trained originally as a microbiologist in New Zealand, doing my bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Otago. The latter I got as a research scientist in the Department of Pediatrics at the Medical School in Christchurch, part of the University of Otago. And then I moved to Australia because I wanted to get a broader background in medical diagnostic microbiology. So I spent 18 months at the Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney as a scientific officer. I was a hospital scientist rather, and then moved to Newcastle and spent 18 years there as a hospital scientist, senior hospital scientist, and spent my last 6 years there as scientific director of virology, having done my PhD at the medical school there in medical virology, and had the interesting experience of not only being responsible for the diagnostic virology service for a region stretching from Lismore down to North Sydney and west way out to the edges of the Hunter Valley, a very large area for a public hospital-based pathology service. And was able to do some very interesting research as well as directing the activities of the diagnostic service. Around 1996, I really had a burning ambition to become an entrepreneur and enter corporate biotechnology. And I was invited to accept a position at a company in Brisbane called PanBio, which was a specialist company developing diagnostic kits for infectious diseases. Pioneered diagnosis of virus infections such as Ross River virus, dengue fever virus, also whooping cough diagnostics, and a number of other interesting things. And I finished there at around about the mid to late 2002, after the company actually listed on the ASX in 2001, which was a successful listing. So I've been through that experience. I was Vice President for R&D and New Technologies at that company. I then left the company and co-founded a DNA diagnostics company based in Brisbane and focused on developing platforms for polymerase chain reaction, PCR, that sort of thing. And we were fortunate enough to be published in leading journals, and our technology was showcased on the front cover of one of those journals, which was quite an honor. And if it wasn't for the GFC, the global financial crisis, which emerged in 2008, we would have developed a number of very, very interesting tests. Because our platform that we developed patented, could do up to 100 simultaneous tests in a single tube, which even today has not been surpassed. So unfortunately, the global financial crisis dried up all venture capital globally, and that company, Biochip Innovations, and thousands like it, unfortunately had to fold. So I've been through that experience as well. After licking wounds for a couple of years, I started to think about what we're going to do next. And one of our investors in that company, who had become a good friend and trusted colleague, we decided we would look into aquaponics. And this is where the name Qponics was originally derived from, the technology of aquaponics, which is the farming of fish together with the farming of hydroponic horticulture, where the effluent of fish fertilizes the growth of the horticulture. So we thought that's interesting, but the margins are very small. So as biotechnology enterprise, it really didn't suit. So we came across microalgae as a replacement for the horticulture. And we spent several years looking at photobioreactor technology for horticulture, growing microalgae in photobioreactor tubes. Along the way, we jettisoned the idea of fish because that was marginal as well. So we focused only on microalgae. So by 2011, we were pretty sure where we were headed. Peter joined the company. We formed Qponics Limited at that time. And we went forward, we raised our seed capital. We spent a few years investigating photobioreactor technology. We looked at 65 different systems globally, and none of them were suitable. None of them were economically viable, in our opinion, and certainly not suitable for funding by investors in Australia. And so by 2016, one of our co-founders, Professor Pierre Schenk at the University of Queensland, was finally able to grow our species of microalgae that we had been developing in partnership with UQ all those years. And he grew the microalgae in his new R&D scale pond farm that he had built through a grant through another source. And basically the productivity that we found in the data was extraordinary. It was so much better than we anticipated. And we recognized at that point that eastern coastal region Australia, central eastern coastal region Australia is what we call now a Goldilocks zone for outdoor microalgae farming. And so we then looked at several sites from Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast. Land properties are very expensive, so it's not really an option. You're looking at, well in excess of $100,000 an acre for land that's on a tidal river and subject to flooding. So we went down to New South Wales, looked at the Tweed River. The land's affordable, but very, very subject to flooding. And we settled on Ballina, even though Ballina, as you know, a year ago had unprecedented flooding there. But we are very confident that there are plenty of rural sites that are suitable that are not subject to excess flooding.
Yep.
So we're now looking at building a what we call a multi-hub farm in the Ballina region. We are we've been invited to apply for significant funding of greater than $100 million by invitation only. So we're very fortunate there with a very high expectation of success. However, this could take another 2 or 3 months before we formalize that investment deal. And so we are raising capital in the interim period to enable us to continue our activities, primarily as a core industry partner in the marine bioproducts, CRC. And we were one of the key industry partners in applying for this new CRC, which was granted back in 2021 by the previous government, and is funded to the tune of 59 million Australian dollars by the Australian government, and other cash contributions total about 270 million over the 10-year life of the CRC. So we've got a number of projects there, and every dollar we spend on R&D projects is matched by the CRC. So we get great leverage there. And we also get access to 11 of the top research institutions in Australia, including universities, CSIRO, SARDI in South Australia, all of which have got different types of expertise in marine biosciences relevant to microalgae. So that's basically where we are at the moment. We have 2 engineers on the team, and we need the interim funding will ensure that we can pay salaries for the next 12 months or so. Yeah. Which will include the period leading up to the big funding that we're expecting.
Yeah. Okay. And before we get into the technology side of it, Peter, what's your background and how did you get to this point?
Thanks, Daniel. I studied economics and commerce at the University of Queensland, graduated in 1981. My specialisation's obviously economics, accounting, business finance. I started with Paul's Limited. They were known as QUF Industries then, which is the dairy processor located in Brisbane. one of the three major dairy processors in Australia, besides National Foods and Australian Cooperative Foods. ASX listed in the top 10, I think, at the time, ASX companies in Queensland. In Queensland, I'm talking about now. At Paul's, I was there for 17 years. Divisional accounting roles, branch accounting, cost and budget accountant. Then I moved into the corporate company secretarial area as assistant company secretary. I was there for, I think it was about 11 years. During that time, this was a time when the dairy industry in Australia was facing deregulation. Dairy industry was state regulated. We had acquired, Paul's had acquired Associated Dairies and Sandhurst Foods in Victoria. So Victoria deregulated before Queensland did. So we were not inexperienced as far as the competitive forces were. But I realised then that the company needed some more in-house legal expertise. So I put my hand up and I did studies through the Barristers Board of Queensland, Queensland here, and took it through to being admitted as a barrister in 1998. I left Paul's in 1999 and went to a firm by the name of Metalstorm. Metalstorm was a high technology defence, largely research and development, but applications technology with weaponry. I was there for 3.5 years. Listed the company on, I joined them just after they listed on ASX, listed the company on NASDAQ while I was there, installed a risk management and corporate governance. This was the era from 1999 through to 2003, where corporate governance really became a thing, or globally, but certainly in Australia. Yep. The Sarbanes-Oxley Acts in the US, I think, late in 2002, and the ASX Good Governance Guidelines were brought down 2003. So that was a very active time there. I was also a member of the what is now the Governance Institute of Australia. I'm a fellow there, also a fellow chartered accountant. I left in 2003 and went consulting for about 4 or 5 years, and then the chairman of Metalstorm, Terry O'Dwyer, well-known corporate figure, certainly in Queensland and throughout Australia, asked me to come back and occupy the role company secretary and governance advisor. So I did that till, I think it was 2009 when I left there and was introduced to Graham by a mutual associate in 2010. So we met there. I joined Qponics then, and then of course Qponics was founded. The Qponics Limited, the current entity, was founded in 2011. So I've been on that journey with Graham as he's just recently spoken about some of that journey, particularly the search for technology globally. And then I think it was in, just forget exactly when, was it 2016, Graham, I think, that Qponics, as the primary applicant, but with the University of Queensland, because we had a long dealing with the University of Queensland, applied for what was the CRCP project grant. And when we looked at some of the figures coming out of the university with their pilot farm, we realised that that was the way to go, rather than looking at the more expensive, greatly more expensive indoor technology that they tend to use in the Northern Hemisphere, mainly because of the climate. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty well my story. My credentials are: I'm a fellow of Chartered Accountants. I'm a fellow of the Governance Institute of Australia. So yes, that's me. That's me in a nutshell.
Perfect. Great to hear your background. So you've briefly mentioned the research and development side of it and the success you've had there, but if we think of it as a if you're trying to explain it to a consumer, tell me what Qponics is.
Well, Qponics is exclusively a marine microalgae company.
Mhm.
We cultivate, harvest, extract the oil, and in the near future, we'll have the capacity to refine the oil into its components. And after the oil is removed, we have what is called a high protein biomass residual component.
Yep.
About 30% of the total biomass of the microalgae is oil, and the remaining 70% is high protein biomass. Now, the oil component, well, before I start all that, perhaps I should just point out that as managing director and CEO, I do have a PhD in medical microbiology, so I feel like I speak the language of scientists and engineers. So I'm sufficiently experienced and qualified to oversee the technical side of the business. Even though I may not fully understand it, I know how to ask questions. So the technology that we've selected is for cultivation. We have selected outdoor raceway ponds. We have a 1/5 size pond that we've built as part of our CRC project grant, which we, as Peter pointed out, we won in 2016 for $1 million, and that was spent upgrading the R&D scale farm that Professor Schenk had built into what we now class as a pilot, small scale pilot commercial operation. So demonstrating all the commercial technologies that we plan to build at much larger scale. So the ponds, the large scale commercial ponds, if you can visualize, are 250 meters long by 16 meters wide. We have not only built the pilot farm, but we've formulated the design of a future commercial farm. Now, the future commercial farm will be built as a modular operation.
Yep.
A single module is 9 of those ponds, each of which are 250 meters long by 16 meters wide. And a super module is 3 of those modules, so 27 ponds. And each super module is serviced by a shed, which includes the harvesting equipment. And we have been pioneers in the use of a Dutch-made ultrafiltration technology, which is specialized for microalgae use, for harvesting and concentrating microalgae. And the species of microalgae we use is a very small single cellular species of microalgae. Otherwise very difficult to harvest, but the ultrafiltration system is extremely efficient, both in the percent concentration down to as high as 18 to 20% if you wish, but 14 to 15 is what we need. The water that is removed from the microalgae ponds during the process is stored and then returned to the ponds after harvesting. So nothing is wasted, water is recycled. So the water we take from a salty tidal river is constantly recycled month after month after month, and then topped up as required from the river. So the harvesting process, we end up with oil, and we have proven that the oil has the highest known natural unrefined concentrations of EPA omega-3 and palmitoleic omega-7 fatty acids. This is quite unusual. EPA omega-7 is a rare fatty acid in nature, and increasingly researchers are finding that it has benefits in the area of obesity control and prevention and control of type 2 diabetes, and research is ongoing in that area. Most of the viewers of this video may be aware of the benefits of EPA omega-3, which is only available through the diet. We as mammals are unable to synthesize it from other materials. We must get it from eating fish or prawns or krill or other fish or animals that eat those particular creatures. So they accumulate omega-3s. And our species of microalgae has the highest concentration known from any source before refining. The protein left over after oil extraction is proven to have up to 72% protein in the biomass. That is extraordinary, and we've done the calculations. And before I continue, it's a complete protein, so it contains all of the essential amino acids. unlike most sources. It is extremely productive in terms of kilograms of protein per hectare per year, 1,000 times greater than beef production, for example, and 30 plus times greater than soybeans or chickpea protein.
Yep.
So it's a very, very, very efficient means of producing protein. And the final thing to mention in terms of the farming process is that we have no need for fresh water at all, other than drinking water, which can be sourced from tanks, like Peter's house, for example. He lives in the rural area. So the potable water is sourced by tank water, and that'll happen on farm because there is no town water on properties there. So the whole farm operation is regarded as drought-proof. No matter how bad the droughts are, as long as the rivers don't dry up and the oceans don't dry up, we'll remain in business. So that's a good position to be in, particularly as we enter further into the 21st century, where drought's going to be a serious ongoing problem. We know we've had flooding in the recent 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
But as we return to the El Nino, we will resume excessive droughts and fires. So we're looking forward to building a drought-proof farm to provide alternative protein as a source, as an ingredient for a new range of food products by food companies in Australia and potentially overseas as well. So the market we see for the protein will be initially in Australia, because you're talking about relatively low cost ingredient product. So shipping is an issue. You don't want to be selling it for $2 and it costs you, $1 to ship it, sort of thing. So you need to be able to ship it to local buyers.
Yep.
And we have a number of food companies that are very, very keen to access protein.
Yep.
The oil is a much higher value product. Current estimates are something in excess of $218 US per kilo. And we're looking at producing about 16,000 kilos per hectare per year of palms. So very lucrative part of the business is the oil. However, from the humanitarian perspective, production of protein is a much more valuable ingredient product. But the whole farm not only is it sustainable because it's drought-proof and has no need for fresh water for sustainability, we have no need for fresh water either. So we can maintain production through the worst of the droughts.
Yep.
Profitably through the sale.
Yeah. So, the opportunity as it is, before we get on to the ask and the capital requirements, but the opportunity as it is, it's a drought-proof, sustainable farming operation that is scalable and the future of food, right?
Yes.
So alternate proteins. Okay, so tell me about the raise. You mentioned that you need $1 million that will, would this be considered as a bridge round? In the meantime, for your much larger raise that you're currently in discussions with.
Sorry, that's my email buzzing. I should have shut it down. Yes, the $1 million we're raising at the moment is an interim round to give us sufficient capital to continue to operate while we're waiting for the bigger investment to come in. We're asking 15 cents Australian per share, which if $1 million is raised, that would value the company at about 16.1 million Australian dollars, something of that order.
The use of funds on the interim raise, yes. Well, first of all, our commitment to the MBCRC, which is a Australia-wide program, Commonwealth Government, Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, is putting in about 58 million. Yeah, this goes over 10 years. Mm-hmm. Graham has been very much involved in the nexus of this, the birth of this. Qponics is a founding partner. Our contributions are $250,000 in the current year, and in the next year as well. So part of the funding there, of course, is to fund our commitment in the current year and also provide funding for the succeeding year as well. And through doing that, we can commence research programs. until we until we contribute the funds, and we have no input to the research program. So we can immediately commence some research programs on some of the aspects of the production at the large farm once the major funding comes in. Also, too, obviously we need to retain staff for that, so that's a important aspect of that as well as talking to the local council with our planning consultants to start that process going as well, and normal operating expenses as well.
Yep. Okay. This is an exciting opportunity considering where, governments across the world are starting to plan, the next 10 to 20 years in terms of the future of food. Sustainability is a big piece. There is a shifting dynamic in current culture where we're becoming a lot more self-aware on the planet and doing things to leave the planet, in a better than we found it. So sustainability and impact is going to be huge for the next 20 to 30 years. And as we are the population is growing, how we're going to feed everybody is on the forefront of everybody's mind. So what you're doing is highly valuable, and you've already spent a long time getting it right. Now it's just fuel on the fire to accelerate.
Good. Yeah, that's a good sign.
Okay, so thank you very much for jumping on. Anybody who's watching this episode, if they're interested in Qponics and the space, please reach out to me. I can connect you directly with the team here and get you connected and to find out more. But thanks, guys, for jumping on. It's been great to chat, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Yep.
Bye.